Okay, hi everyone, it's Alan Schuldiner. Good morning, afternoon, and evening to all, and welcome back to this last session of our G2MC virtual meeting. This session is a nice bookend to the program in that many of us participated in individual working group sessions on Wednesday of this week. And we have 5 presentations to get through in an hour, in which each of the working groups is going to provide an update on what was discussed. And I'm going to push each of the working groups hard to come up with some very concrete, tangible next steps so that we could make the actions of these working group real. So each presentation, really we need to limit to 5 minutes or less because I would like there to be time for discussion, at least 5 minutes for each, and we'll handle the discussion after each presentation. So with that introduction, we'll start with the education working group, and this group is led by Bruce and Rich. Please take it away.
Okay. Actually, in Vajira, whose picture didn't make it on here, I'm not sure why. He was at a different working group, though, for the rare disease that was happening at the same time. So Rich and I did run the meeting this time around. Next slide, please. And next again, yeah. So 3 things I'll try to cover very quickly. 1 is the education survey, 2, the boot camp, and 3rd is next steps. So next, please. So this was a map showing the participants in the education working group as of just a few days ago. I don't know that every single one was on the call that we had. We're pretty well represented, or at least fairly represented in some parts of the world. I think Europe was not that well represented this time, and it may be because of our focus on Latin America and lesser resource countries, but nonetheless, there was a pretty substantial diversity of participation in the education working group. Next, please. So during this past few weeks, as most of you, I hope, know, a survey was sent out to G2MC members first, and then at the beginning of this meeting, it was also sent out to anybody who was participating in the meeting. Rich Haspel spearheaded this effort. And it really was a attempt to obtain information from the various members about the resources that they might have available in terms of audiences that they can work with, and also what the needs were in their country. There were about 55 responses at the time when the meeting began. I don't know what the number is right now. Hopefully it's gone up significantly. I'm not going to present any of the data from here, and partly that's because of the fact that we expect more data to come in, and partly we don't want to bias the data that has come in already. So there is going to be a report on this at a later point after we've had a chance to gather all the data together. So please do respond if you haven't. We are asking not to disseminate the survey to others outside the participants in this meeting, only for kind of quality control purposes. And we also don't need multiple responses really from a single country. Some asked about using the survey locally, and we may be able to provide a version of it that will make that possible. Next, please. So actually, I think I've said this, and this will inform next steps for the working group over the course of the coming year. Next, please. The other big point of discussion was the so-called Genomic Medicine Bootcamp. It had been planned to do a course for local providers in Santiago. It would have happened tomorrow, and it was really an attempt to capture the expertise that would be represented at the time of the meeting. And a curriculum was put together that I'll show you in just a minute. It obviously isn't going to occur because we did not think that this would lend itself to the kind of approach that we're forced to use now. Just click one more time. I'm not personally that fond of the boot camp metaphor. It implies that you're going to have to go through something really difficult and unpleasant, maybe towards a better end. Maybe we can find a better metaphor for this. But the point is to do an immersion over a short period of time. Next, please. This was the curriculum that was put together. Jeanette McCarthy, who has done this kind of thing before, was very helpful in generating this. I'm not going to read you all of these things. This was actually put together before the Education Working Group was really sort of back to full speed. And it was really helpful to have somebody who had done it before help to lead it. But I think the Education Working Group has made it clear they would like to be actively involved in this, including helping to develop the curriculum. And there were many volunteers to do that. So I would hope that we can continue to engage Jeanette, but also members of the working group in order to make a immersion course, boot camp, whatever you want to call it, happen in time for the next meeting. So when the face-to-face meeting does occur, we'll do our best to make that happen. Next, please. So our next steps to analyze the survey data. This was a great be careful what you wish for, because a lot of data has come in and it's going to take time and effort to do that. We're thinking about maybe engaging a student who wants a project as a way to do it. I'll finish in a sec. Subgroup to plan the boot camp, and we're going to set up monthly follow-up meetings. And I'll just end, Rich was really the spearhead behind the survey. Meredith Towery was enormously helpful in putting it together, and there was a lot of energy in the group, and I think that's great. So I'll end here.
Great, thanks, Bruce. Any questions?
It's Rich. I just wanted to, just one more minute of comments.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, no, thank Bruce pretty much summarized. I just, again, want to thank everyone who took the survey and Meredith. And the data looks interesting, but we had a good discussion about balancing, some of the control of data collection versus more responses. So we welcome, participants at this meeting, even if you're not a G2MC member, but we ask that you do not share the link at this time. And actually your link is personalized just for you in your email. So please check your email and take it. We're hoping you can get to it in the next couple of months. And it is for people who have knowledge of their country's healthcare provider genetics education needs. So we're focusing, at least this first go, on healthcare provider education and what might be needed and what could G2MC help in terms of providing resources. So I just want to say I think the boot camp is a great opportunity for the working group to work together, and there's a lot of interest. And just again, to say just I think we had over 40 people on the call, and there was a really good discussion. There was some give and take, but thinking about how to proceed. And we really appreciate the involvement, and I think we have some momentum that we're hoping to keep going. And the first step is trying to set up some monthly calls so we can keep things moving along. So thanks a lot.
Thanks, Bruce, and thanks, Rich. There was a proposal in the chat to change boot camp to genomic medicine immersion program. That sounds good to me, but just a comment. And also an emerging theme here is the idea of trying to do more of everything, I guess, virtually, including some of these education programs. Bruce and Rich, any comments or thoughts about how to move more to virtual reality?
Virtual reality, that would be interesting. But I do think that the possibility exists to create something that an online kind of offering that could be provided in this way. And it's certainly on the list of things to think about. Originally, the point was to take advantage of expertise at a local area. And it remains to be seen to what extent people are amenable to different modalities of education. That's one thing that's actually embedded in the survey, and we'll have some information about that. So I think everything is on the table.
Yeah, and I would agree. I think there are some advantages of in-person teaching, especially with things like team-based learning, and creating a really good online teaching resource is, not just having a webinar can be very involved and can cost some money. But I think all things are being discussed. And one of the nice things about the survey is we're getting a sense that G2MC members have access to different learners. So if we create something, we could at least pilot it. And the things we'd want to create wouldn't be things like that might, well, we can think about creating things that have like a handbook or things like that. So if we create something and have it locally, other people could have all the materials they need to then take it back to their home institution and implement it themselves. So that's another model that can be used. If you provide everything someone needs to hold a workshop or a course, they could then take it back and it could be taught anywhere.
I love that idea, sort of a local sponsorship model. Great. Well, we need to move on. So let's move to the second working group report, and that's the Policy and Advocacy Working Group. Catalina, Laura, please go ahead.
Yeah, Alan, well, thank you so much. We don't have beautiful slides as you have. You have to see our photos for the presentation. But, well, we had also a very productive meeting. We had about 25 people at one point, and we initiated our discussion with the presentation from the World Economic Forum, Elisa Prishep, that presented a white paper that is being developed and is in the process of being finalized on the challenges and opportunities around genomic data in developing countries, emerging economies, and LIMICs regions. I think that paper will be publicly available very soon, and I think we can even circulate it inside the group. I will highly encourage all of you, and in particular, all the members, all the participants in this conference that are coming from the South, from Latin America, Africa. I think you will find it very relevant. There are a lot of the concepts in terms of equity, inclusion, informed consent, working in a real collaborative and with a collaboration spirit, and not just, as we discussed initially on the previous session, the challenges we have in those North-South collaborations. And they have also developed some vignettes and concrete examples that could be used even as education tools for us to learn how to generate and embark in more productive North-South collaborations. So that initial part took a fair amount of our discussion, and that was new because it was the opportunity for the World Economic Forum to present that. That document was initiated with a series of policy and advocacy and policy in particular experts. I know a couple of people from Canada participated in that. There were many representatives from the US, representatives from Rwanda, and there were a couple of representatives from Latin America that work with the World Economic Forum in preparing that. Our goal with the G2MC is to start working hand by hand with the World Economic Forum in this policy group, and we're hoping to have Elisa as a very active member with us. So that's an important part. Now, the second part is the work we have done in the past 2 years. That's a landscape analysis in terms of policy. That work was initially done by Andrea, from Australia, working in just mapping the different policy and all the policies around genomic data that are developed in different countries. So you will see that document is a PDF document. You can download it in our webpage at the G2MC, and you see examples of policies that are being developed. We all think that document could be also very useful for countries in the South that are starting to develop those policies in a way that they could use these and develop the framework before in a more proactive manner instead of developing the framework and the policy framework after the fact, as it is happening. I know my experience in Canada, we were trying to develop some policies just to correct some challenges we were facing already when millions and millions of data points were generated in terms of genomic data. The opportunity is for countries in the South to be proactive, use and develop those frameworks and those policies before we have millions of data points and millions of genomes that are being sequenced and we don't know how to handle the data, how to share and not to share and all that. So that was the second component. And again, I invite you all to just have a look at that. And the idea for the next step with the policy group is to continue updating that document to gather more and more information. We know all countries are actively thinking about these policies, so we want to keep that document updated and enrich it even more with policies that are coming from developing countries. And we had a discussion about COVID and how to aggregate data. And Laura, if you're there and you want to comment on that part that you were leading for the COVID and how we could use these opportunity and challenges we have all around the world, but take it as an opportunity to potentially go more into open collaboration, just share data. Laura? I'm not sure.
Sure. I'm not sure that there's much more to add at this point. It was really a first conversation to begin exploring with the group where they saw potential opportunities for G2MC to leverage its unique ability to bring people together around the world. Well, maybe not unique, but again, unique about what G2MC could do, as it, I think, also straddles many research settings as well as focus on implementation. And so a place to either serve as a collection venue for resources, again, across the different places in the world that we can represent for the people who are engaged with the group, or looking at some kind of analyses of issues that are coming out of it that aren't just going to be issues for data sharing and the other issues involved with the kind of work that's happening with COVID in very short succession, but looking at the long-term issues and how can we, as Catalina was talking about, capitalize on the momentum that is happening right now with COVID to be able to extrapolate that to some long-term and more sustainable ways of quote, doing business. And so don't want to let that opportunity go by. So we're just beginning to think through that. And I think a lot of it is going to take time to sort out for some of these opportunities to be identified and to make sure what's really an opportunity, and so that we're not duplicating things that are happening other places, but really doing something that can leverage the strengths of G2MC.
Thank you, Laura. And I think many of you have seen the program, and that this working group is shared together with the coordination of the policy working group is shared with Sue Hill, Dame Sue Hill, which is the Chief Scientific Officer at the National Health Service in England. And of course, as you can imagine, she is pretty busy right now with all the COVID, trying to increase the testing from 100,000 tests to 250. So she couldn't be here, but she has been a strong supporter of the policy group, and she will continue. Hopefully we will see her next year in Chile. She will continue supporting this group. And I will say the last comment on the policy group, policy and advocacy group, we didn't touch much in the patient part on the advocacy group, because most of the group unfortunately was focusing initially on the policy. But through the conference, we have seen great presentations on patient advocacy and the importance of patient participation in all genomic research. I know there are some, I know at least from my experience at Genome BC, we were working very, very hard in Canada and Genome British Columbia in particular to include patients as part of the research. I think now, again, with the COVID, that gave us an opportunity to see that genomics is not just out there, that technologies developed around genomics could touch each of us at different levels. So I think that's a great opportunity for us to strengthen the component of advocacy, and in particular patient participation in this group. And that's going to be another of our goals for next year with the G2MC policy and advocacy group. And last but not least, I know many of the participants here also come from the South, as I am now in the South. And I think again, with the COVID, I think is a great opportunity to put science at the front of what we're doing, and to give science a meaning that science is not just in the lab, but is really outside the lab, and in particular for genomics that can help us provide concrete solutions. So I know, again, some countries are starting to think about policy, but maybe not yet so proactive. So I invite each of you in your different groups to start thinking about policy. What is that your country is doing in terms of policy? How are they framing the use of genomic data? In terms of policy, and how are they advancing initiatives to use genomic data to protect privacy, to give the right consent, to promote these collaborations, to exchange, integrate, and share data. So you will find our emails, our contacts, and so please feel free to contact us. We'll be happy to work with people from different regions around the world in this policy and advocacy group. And again, thank you. I don't know if there are any questions in the chat, or let me see.
I think one comment about the need for policies with regard to private-public alliances.
Yeah, that's a very good point. We didn't touch much on that. We were focusing mostly on developing countries, but I know some countries, and again, my experience in Canada, we were working hard and closely with the provincial government in understanding what the role of the private sector, the ownership in terms of some data, and even you, Alan, on your role at Regeneron, maybe can comment a little bit on that. I know, of course, that there's always this perception and maybe the history that there are some challenges in terms of the collaboration and data sharing with private sector. But I think with some maybe more advanced policy frameworks, we should be able to go over those roadblocks. But maybe you can comment on that, Alan. Back to you.
Well, it wasn't my question, and
I know.
it's obviously a very complicated area.
I know.
Laura knows that because we'd had some email exchanges earlier in the week specifically on this topic. So let's table it for now, but certainly we need to bring this front and center as this working group moves forward. Let's move to the next presentation. Again, just in the interest of time, we have two flagship programs, and one of them is in the rare diseases space. And Vijayra will provide a summary of what the working group handled on Wednesday when we last spoke. Vijayra.
Pleasure to see all of you. We had a very good discussion. We had over 100 participants in this working group meeting where we discussed many issues. So as you know, this is the spread of the low middle income countries where we want to enable genomic medicine. So a pretty widespread across the world. And I picked up this slide from Ricardo's presentation a little while ago, where he picked up the the wheel that myself and Nirmala drew to describe the challenges in the low middle income countries. And this is what we are trying to overcome, or try to demonstrate that we can overcome with this flagship project. So in the next few minutes, I'll just briefly, to people who may not be familiar with the project, tell us a few things about the project itself, and then move on to telling you what we are planning to do. So this project is aimed at enabling LMICs around the world to implement genomic medicine genome and genome sequencing in children with rare undiagnosed genetic disorders, and to establish a network of clinics in hospitals in LMICs that are able to deliver this service. So the specific objectives that would enable us to do that include training of clinicians and others on all these different aspects that the Education Committee Working Group has been talking on. Then implementing some research pilot programs, and then of course evaluating the clinical outcomes, provider patient satisfaction, and so on. So I think having listened to the various speakers in this conference, there are lots of resources that we can tap into to make these objectives a reality beyond the people who participated in the working group. And Helen and I would make an attempt to reach out to them so that they can become a group that helps us further. Now, the discussion points during the breakout was Alan presented his prior experience where Regeneron Genomics Center had global collaboration. So he presented that. And so around that, we were able to tease out the issues that would come up in a project like this. And we discussed those, so selection of clinical sites, coordinating center, IRB approvals, government engagement, regulatory issues, and so on. And then, of course, the need for the sequencing, bioinformatics analysis, validation of results, return of results, and so on. So the entire gamut of things we discussed during this session, and it was a very, very engaging and interactive session. Then we've also discussed wider collaboration with the rare disorders research community, and Bill Gall, who leads the Undiagnosed Disease Network International, came in, and he has now reached out to us with the objective of forming a broader alliance involving UNDI and G2MC on this project. And we've also initiated today on the sidelines of the meeting a discussion on a collaboration with Riddick, and following the presentation. So we will also take that discussion also forward. So what are our next steps? The next steps is a call for expression of interest. Actually, we did send out a call prior to the conference a little while ago, and we had 36 expressions of interest prior to the meeting, and during and after the breakout, we had 2 more. So there is a lot of interest out there. Then we'll need to select local PIs and teams at implementation sites, establish a project PI and a steering committee, and develop a high-level project proposal, and also initiate a discussion with funding agencies, and of course engage the LMICs, governments, and this is where the World Health Organization comes in. And last year we initiated a discussion which kind of lost momentum along the way, but we will be again following Soumya's presentation this afternoon. I reached out to her to bring in that conversation back again. Then we will have to move on to a development for detailed project proposal, the obtaining of IRB approvals with the central IRB as well as the local IRBs, and then start training project implementation teams, and maybe some amount of upgrading of facilities in clinics where this is going to happen also would have to happen. And then that would mean in terms of funding, we may need to reach out beyond the traditional funders to international development agencies who may be willing to fund this type of work. So, and then of course, once the project gets off the ground, project implementation with monitoring and evaluation by the steering committee. So these are the steps that we are looking at, and we want to set a timeline for this because I think we reach a finality in the discussions. So we want to start a series of monthly progress review meetings with the sites who have now expressed interest, and then work towards launching the project officially at the 6th G2MC meeting. Usually we'll have a lag time of about 18 months, I think, but even in an informal way, we may get things moving even faster, but in a formal launch at the 6th meeting when it happens. So that is the kind of plans that we have, and I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thanks, Vijaya. Just to emphasize that, I think it's really important that we get something started and build from there. And we want to start at the grassroots where we'd like to get 5 or 10 vanguard sites from low and middle income countries that will really drive these first steps forward. The last thing we want to do is reinvent the wheel. There are a number of really successful projects in the rare disease spaces, and we look forward to partnering with them. Any other questions before we move on to our next working group report? I don't see any. So let's move on to the Family History Working Group. Grant.
Okay, Alan, since I was originally said that we had 12 minutes, I got 12 minutes worth of slides to go through. I'll do it quickly in 5 minutes. So we'll go next slide. I want to thank the group that joined. We had about 35 people attend this. We had half of those people were brand new to G2MC, which was really exciting to have new people there. I also want to thank Teji for doing great minutes for that breakout. Next slide. So first topic, we covered several different topics. The first topic is the long-term goal for this group is to develop some sort of a shared project across multiple countries around family health history. And we understand that in each of these different locations, the level and ability to do family history varies. And so we want to have something that helps sort of like lifts all boats type of a project. But this project would actually go better if we had some funding for it. So we had a conversation around funding opportunities. Theodora from Greece has been working on EU grant that's been a little bit delayed because of COVID-19, but that's an exciting opportunity that we're going to track and support her efforts in applying for that grant. Jeff made a mention that it would be great to have the resources to build on the G2MC website a family history resource center where everybody could go to see maybe knowledge experts, examples of implementations, different papers, access to tools, grant opportunities, that type of thing. So that's a very interesting idea that we'd like to accomplish. Next slide. Some other ideas we looked at funding is to reach out to maybe some non-government funding activities like genealogy companies, cloud providers, and software tech companies that might provide sort of like in-kind support technology type resources for a project. Genetic testing labs are interested in family history as part of the products and services they sell. Obviously, direct-to-consumer companies like a 23andMe and even rare disease foundations. Of course, we'd have to, if we worked with these groups, we know that we need to focus the family history around the rare diseases that they are interested in. And as we approach each of these, we have to come up with a plan, a strategic plan, where it's kind of a marketing plan, where we come up with a good story for each one of these as we approach them. So that's going to be one of our big next step projects going forward. Next slide. I shared quickly, I always like to share with the group other activities that are going on within other organizations like the Global Alliance for Genomics Health and HL7. In G4GH, we're working on a project that we're creating a minimum core data set for family history. And that is a data set of common data elements and the definitions for those data elements that we would recommend that anybody that builds a family health history tool, that tool would be able to collect data on those data elements. The plan with that activity, when we get a first draft of that ready to go next month or two, that we will share it back with G2MC and get feedback from G2MC. We also reviewed what HL7 is doing with FHIR and different pedigree standards. I think it's important for even non-technical people to be aware of these standards that are out there, and that will be important in creating data interoperability as we share family health history data. Next slide. Biggest part of our breakout was the sharing of use cases, and we had and let's go to next slide here. And we did have I started by creating an online web form that people could go to and enter use cases. Since I don't have the time to review this, but this was just a start showing how there's a lot of different use cases in family health history, whether just doing it for looking at familial risk within a family, maybe around a particular disease, all the way to doing cascade testing for indication, using family history for an indication for genetic testing, etc. Next slide. I was very happy with the breakout in that many people spoke up and did share what was going on in their countries. And so you can see here a list of people that did share with us, all had different stories to tell, and quite a lot of opportunity for us as a group, as G2MC. And this really gets to, I think, what G2MC is all about, is sharing with each other what's happening in our locations and what we'd like to accomplish, what's our goals, what we would like to achieve. Next slide. So we are hoping that that online web form that's out there, that more people will go to it and add these family history use cases. We want them to describe, what current collection tools they have right now, but what they'd like to have created. What is their target population? What's their main focus of collecting this data? And really beyond that, what's really the main goal or high level clinical outcome they want to achieve by doing this? And it's really interesting in that we have quite a range of goals here, and it's really kind of fascinating to see that. Next slide. So here I just wanted to quickly share kind of graphically that if we're looking at family history and we want to put it in the center of the universe for a moment, so to speak, that our goal is to create the infrastructure, the data interoperability that can move data between applications, the patient apps, or apps from other organizations, whether it's a healthcare system or a research organization or a rare disease group or lab, etc., that all might have a family history app that collects data, that data can then be linked to the genomic repository, linked to the EMR of the patient. And so that data then can be shared to other stakeholders like those in the research and clinical trial space. So this is a very simple high-level diagram, but it explains what our long-term goal is trying to achieve with family health history. Next slide. So we have some goals that we're going to be working on going forward with the group. Let's discuss, what tools we can share, what tools need to be local, what are our data storage requirements for our localities. Well, how can we share or access data across countries? Next slide. Then the long-term goals are how can we establish, more common or standardized methods to capture this data? How can we make sure that we can generate consistent data across multiple locations so we can more easily share that data? And then eventually get to the point where we'd like to have that data available to develop clinical decision support algorithms. Next slide. So one last comment I'll make is this: I mentioned there's some really interesting use cases. Theodora has talked about using family health history around adverse drug events. Jeff commented like maybe this is a great opportunity with COVID to use family history to talk, learn about, are we seeing infectious disease transmissions within families and how families respond to that. So a lot of great work, a lot of work ahead of us, a lot of excitement, I think, came from the group to achieve some big goals. So stay tuned to see how we do. Thank you, Ellen.
Thanks so much, Grant. We have time for a question or two. I understand that there's a hand raised, although I don't see it, but I can ask a quick question of Grant while we're waiting. Family history and polygenic risk scores are going to probably at some point need to go hand in hand and even potentially be compared head to head. Grant, any thoughts about polygenic risk scores and in the context of an implementation working group?
Yeah, that'd be another exciting area we'd like to explore. Of course, we're talking about so many great ideas, and we want to do them all right now, and so we're trying to figure out how to set up the infrastructure and get the resources to do this. But yes, just think about another exciting opportunity to look at how polygenic risk scores might expand the value and the benefit and the analysis of a family health history. I think right now within the healthcare world, and I've been looking at family history for 15 years now, we just scratched the surface of what that tool could do. And I think if we kind of opened up our minds to go beyond how we use the tool today and what we could do with it further, there's really a lot of exciting things. And so the polygenic risk score, definitely on the list, and just think of the exciting kind of research and discovery we could do with that. And I think that'd be great that G2MC kind of lead that.
Terrific. But in the interest of time, I think we should move on to the last working group update, and that's the evidence group. Mark and Fahd, please take it away.
I may start and Fahd may jump in. And thank you, Alan and Grant, for the fantastic transition about the polygenic risk scores. We met with the group in September and decided what was redefine our aims and scope, and exactly we confirmed that we want to move into polygenic diseases. The next slide, please. And so our aim is to assess and regularly update current evidence of clinical utility of genomic medicine for polygenic disorders, that is with no major gene, for example, coronary artery disease. And so we'd like to assess if we have evidence that would look like this. Polygenic risk scores of CAD would allow better prevention in tested normal subjects. So that would qualify for clinical utility. Or that a polygenic risk score of CAD would allow for better therapy in patients who already had a myocardial infarct. But this scope is still quite ambitious and challenging, so I may have, next slide please. We agreed on a list of very operational diseases on which we want to focus the search. And this is the list that's been discussed with the group. Yesterday, the day before yesterday, we had an attendance of 19 people, some of them new to the group, whom we will blend into the original group, working group for evidence. And we've been careful to distinguish the subgroup of these common disorders, which are in fact inherited and due to single, highly penetrant monogenic mutations. For example, we want to focus on breast cancer, except BRCA1, BRCA2. We want to focus on diabetes type 2, except MODY or other inherited monogenic diabetes. The next, please. And so after rediscussion, we agreed we have two tasks we want to pursue in parallel. One is to go on with the expert review, search PubMed plus manual curation. So if you remember, we did that a couple of years ago and submitted to a journal, to Genetics in Medicine, which is a very selective journal for this kind of work. And it was rejected. We still believe that it is useful to make a date and demonstrate what is the current evidence. we found that for this very strict category of hard evidence of clinical utility for polygenic susceptibility, there was nothing in the literature. And this nothing startled many people. I think if we find this again, we have to better explain exactly the frame of our inclusion and exclusion criteria, and this we have been redesigning with the group again. The second parallel task is to develop a semi-automated artificial intelligence-based search engine for scanning evidence of genomic medicine in polygenic disease. And we'll use the list of diseases and maybe some seed studies, either positive results of demonstrated clinical utility or non-demonstrated but near demonstrating studies that might be used as seeds there. And there we had the invaluable help of Grant, who helped us with his connections in with the group of discussion of IT and identified colleagues with specific expertise in this kind of development. And thanks to Grant, we are now in contact. We liaised with colleagues in Brisbane, Australia, Bevan Koopman and David Hansen. And with the help of the group, we shaped with them, we are now shaping what we exactly want to do to assess the evidence and then to update it regularly. What we aim to have is something that would be posted, for example, on the G2MC website, so that practitioners, medical doctors could look there and see what is useful and they can already use in their clinic. The next, please. And so as the to-dos is to have the snapshot of the evidence. We'll have to adjust the query terms string to a query PubMed for evidence, and we decided to stratify them in strong evidence, moderate or loose, and then manually curate the items in duplicate. And for the second aim, finalize a list of disease and start to shape what we need and help have our colleagues there design with our needs. So we want to finish this snapshot with manual curation somewhere by the end of this summer or in the fall of this year. And we hope, but it's difficult to guess, to have something up and running in 2022 for an automatically updated list of diseases where polygenic risk scores or other tools will be demonstrating evidence of clinical utility in polygenic predisposition. And with this, I think that's it. All right. Fab, did I overlook anything or any comment you need to make?
Absolutely not. You're always spot on, Mark.
Thanks.
Yeah.
All right.
Great. Well, this was terrific. We have a few minutes in which we can handle questions.
This is Jeff Ginsburg. I thought I'd just jump in with something I actually mentioned in the chat. First of all, congratulations to the working group chairs on really putting forward a great set of strategies and plans. And I wondered if any of you feel like this warrants, even while you're doing them, writing them up so that the world effectively knows what we're trying to do, even beyond who's been in this meeting over the last couple of days. It just seems like we're now sort of reinvigorating a number of areas that the G2MC can have an impact in. Even if, to broadcast that in some way as a published publication, an assembly of these strategies, to me at least, is appealing. I don't know if I'd like to see if any of the working group chairs share that enthusiasm.
Jeff, I support that idea 100%.
So do I.
Yes, me too.
Yeah. So this is what we've been working on with Mark, is to actually put things down and form a protocol so that other people can learn from our experience. Thanks for raising this, Jeff.
I'm sure education would be glad to participate. We also, I didn't mention this, but did bat around the possibility of a specific publication on the outcome of the survey.
Yeah, that might warrant its own, separate, potentially separate project. But maybe one of the things we can do, with your permission, is to try to use the secretariat of the G2MC to nudge you all to get some of your teams to get something in writing that's already beautifully displayed on these slides. I think somebody just needs to be able to put it into prose.
And Jeff, this would be a fantastic idea to reach out to possible funders in the future, because this could really show the extent and the breadth of G2MC. And I think a lot of people would be fascinated to read about what we're doing, and especially funders might be interested in being part of us.
Great point, Grant. Thank you.
One thing that occurred to me, and I'm sure others, is that among the 5 working groups, there's some interaction, but maybe there could be more. And for example, for the flagship projects, Vajira and I working through how we would implement a rare undiagnosed disease project. Clearly, we're going to have to call very heavily on education programs, and the education committee, of course, has all the expertise there to help us with that. A lot of issues with regard to policy and advocacy, evidence, et cetera, et cetera. So maybe this is also a call for the working groups, of course, to be doing their own thing, but also trying to cross-pollinate each other's expertise to essentially float all boats higher.
Hi, it's Rich. Just to follow up, I think that's a great idea. Just a very practical point that came up during our call on education was, if we want to look at needs by country and their resources, what metrics should we use to divide countries, like GDP or something like that? And it came up that maybe we should interact with the policy group. So we could even consider, if there are people who have cross interests, we could have liaisons from one group to the other or something like that. That gets a little beyond, but I think there's definitely opportunities to interact.
Couldn't agree more. And, since you brought it up, Rich, one thing I would advocate against is continuing to use this north-south delineation. For one thing, as we all know, it's quite artificial, but also, I don't know, it seems to be introducing contention and maybe in some ways resentment that doesn't need to be part of the discussion, or at least if it is part of the discussion, we should address it head on and move forward in productive ways. Anyway, that's just a commentary.
I am definitely not an expert on this stuff, but I still could imagine that different countries will have different needs. So, how to do that in the appropriate way is and how to look at the data is, we could definitely use input.
Any other comments? Okay, well, not seeing any. Thanks so much to the working groups for all of their hard work, and presenters today summarizing what has been discussed and achieved. I see a lot of progress, and I think we have a good roadmap moving forward for even more. So thanks very much for everyone's hard work and efforts. And at this point, I'll turn the meeting back to our organizers, Gabriella and Bruce.
All right, thanks, Alan. I'm going to get started, and then I will turn it over to Gabriella to close us out. So why don't we go to the next slide? We're sort of uncannily on time, even ahead now. And it's just amazing to me to realize that we're at the end of a marathon 2 days that I think just went unbelievably well and smoothly. If I have one kind of big picture impression that I take away, and I don't know how many would share this, I'll use a metaphor, which is, at least in my experience, if you ask a friend if they would like to, let's say, play tennis with you or golf or cards or whatever, it seems to me like almost all the time, if you haven't played before, their answer is, well, okay, but I'm really terrible. And then you start playing and you discover their definition of terrible doesn't correspond with yours. And I sort of feel this is a little bit like how I feel listening to the talks over this past 2 days. If you ask any one individual colleague about the status of genomic medicine in their country, they'll always say we have a huge amount ahead of us, a long way to go. We're not nearly as far as we wish we were. And then you listen to what's going on, and it's really pretty staggering how much is actually happening, and impressive. And yes, we all have a long way to go in this, but I think it would really be unfair to say that we haven't made a lot of progress as a community. And this includes in countries of various resources. And I think this has been a really wonderful exposition of that kind of progress that we've seen. We all do face roadblocks, and those are not always the same. There are probably some that are pretty common among us and others that are unique to any particular situation. And I think here the sharing is particularly helpful. I think that I made the point during the break when somebody made the comment about reinventing the wheel that I'm a big believer in reinventing the wheel. And that's not really exactly true because very few of the things that we do are as pure and simple as the wheel. We're dealing with a lot of complexity, and there is a lot of room for innovation. And I wouldn't take the point of view that, well, because one group has come up with an educational solution, the rest of us don't have to think about it, we can just replicate it. Because that is true to a degree, but it's not true completely, since it has to be tailored to the environment in which we work. So I think there's a lot of wheel reinventing that we should actually encourage and then share and then use it to continually sort of refine the various kinds of approaches that work in our environments and can be modified to work in others. I, for one, think this virtual meeting was enormously successful. I'm hoping we'll have some feedback from participants to get a sense of whether there's agreement with that. Now, nobody would argue that this should replace a face-to-face meeting, I hope, and Gabriella will talk in a few minutes about plans for that. But I think it is remarkable how much good interaction and conversation has taken place in this past 2 days. And then finally, I just want to reiterate what was said at the beginning, thanking the organizers, the members of the planning committee. I don't have that slide to show at this moment, excuse me, but a lot of people worked very hard to put the program together and to organize the various components of it. The speakers in the various sessions, I think really did an enormously good job of making their presentations and tailoring them to this kind of approach. The many people who have attended, I'm seeing 128 now, that's remarkable, actually, sort of people sticking with this through 2 days. Our sponsors whose generosity and flexibility is greatly appreciated. And finally, I really have to especially thank Teji, Hannah, Meredith, and I'm sorry if I don't mention everybody because these are the ones that I've probably personally worked with the most, but I know the Secretariat has really borne the kind of brunt of the effort to put this together. And as I mentioned yesterday, undoing a tremendous, like a year's worth of work to do a face-to-face meeting, and then creating out of whole cloth really a virtual meeting. And now, as this is coming to a close, I'm sure the work doesn't end for all of you, but I just want to especially thank those that I've mentioned and those that I didn't mention but should have for doing this.
Daniela.
Gabriella, for some good pisco sour recipes, because you all deserve one for this weekend. With that, let me turn it over to Gabriella.
Thank you, Bruce. Yeah, I also want to join in the thanks to the terrific team that put this together, and all our speakers and participants. I think that even though we were far away, there was a lot of interaction and participation. I'm happy to see this. So just a few words, if I can have the next slide, please. We really fulfilled the aims that we had agreed on for this meeting, and we have learned about a lot of initiatives around the world and talked about barriers and how to overcome them, and really hope we foster international collaborations through this activity, and hope to see specific projects come along. So can I have the next slide, please? And we are really happy that along these 2 days, we almost had 500 people come into this meeting, compared to the usual 120 or so that we have had for the prior meeting. So we hope we can keep that everybody stays engaged. And can I have the next slide, please? So before we hit the leave this meeting button, which is a lot easier than grabbing your bags and having to go to an airport for a number of long flights, I'd like to just summarize future steps, things that we have heard about, and especially in the last session with all these great working group initiatives. And we hope they continue to take advantage of this virtual mode of working and accelerate all the great projects that they're working on. We've also heard about proposals for publications from the speakers and also from the audience. So white paper on low middle income countries, available programs and challenges and future developments. We just heard about publishing the work of the working group. So, and of course we welcome other proposals and people who wish to participate and contribute. Funding is also a usual issue. So I think we have a substantial task there in engaging both traditional and non-traditional funding sources to keep this work going. And if I can have the next slide, please. And of course, as we said at the beginning, this is only part one of the G2MC 2020 meeting. So we hope to see you in the face-to-face meeting in Santiago. Please keep in touch. There's the website, and once it's safe, I think we will hope to be seeing everybody and meeting you in person. Okay, so I wanted to invite Jeff to give the final words, and then I don't know, we can all unmute our microphones and clap around the world.
Thank you, Gabriella and Bruce. So as you can see behind me, the sun is setting on this wonderful meeting. I want to also acknowledge my wonderful co-chairs of the G2MC, Catalina Lopez Correa and George Petrinos, who have been really helping us steward this organization to new heights. One of the things that struck me about the last couple of days is how in our name, Global Genomic Medicine Collaborative, the global and the collaborative piece really rung out very strongly and was mentioned by many of our speakers and attendees. So as I have tended to do, I really encourage us to take action, not just to talk about what we might do, but to actually do something. That's often coming out of meetings like this. It doesn't always happen, but I am incredibly encouraged by what I've heard and seen, that we will be a very action-oriented meeting now with many other friends that have joined us, particularly over the last 2 or 3 days, that I hope you all will remain engaged. So once again, I want to thank our tireless secretariat team, Daniela, who has been instrumental helping us put this together locally, as Bruce said, moving from face-to-face to virtual, as well as Teji, Hannah, Brittany, and Meredith. I also want to extend my thanks to Bruce and Gabriella, who've been wonderful co-chairs in planning this event, both the face-to-face and the virtual one, as well as the planning committee. I also want to thank the more than 400 individuals who spent time with us over the last 2 to 3 days. It's really inspiring as well as invigorating to have your engagement. So I guess as we now not pick up our bags, but click the leave meeting button, as Gabriella said, I urge you all to stay safe and stay healthy during this unusual time, and think about how the G2MC can help you in your local organizations to implement genomic medicine, but also think about how you can remain involved as you have been over the last few days with what we're trying to do. So with that, I guess I don't have a gavel, but I will encourage us all to unmute ourselves if that's something that can be done, and give a round of applause for everybody that participated over the last couple of days.